I call to order this meeting of the Oversight Committee. It's 0900 hours. Ms. Payne, please proceed to the roll call.
Dr. Cummings?
Present and accounted for.
Mr. Margot?
Here.
Dr. Hernandez?
Here.
Mr. Montgomery?
Mostly here.
Dr. Patel? Dr. Rice?
Here.
Dr. Rosenfeld?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Members, you have the draft minutes from the November 18th Oversight Committee meeting in your agenda packet behind tab 1. Any corrections to the minutes as circulated? Hearing none, the Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the November 18th Oversight Committee meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Next agenda item is public comment. Texans created CPRIT. Opening our meetings with public comment underscores the board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Doyle, has CPRIT received any requests to provide public comment? Roberts will provide the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to start off by thanking Commissioner Harrison Keller and the staff of the Coordinating Board for graciously allowing us to use these wonderful facilities. This may be the last time we meet here, maybe not, but it's our understanding that one of the new state office buildings that's going up immediately north of our building, the Travis building, is going to have a number of sizable conference rooms that all state agencies will have access to. In fact, I think the Coordinating Board is moving into that building. It's going to be the Barbara Jordan State Office building, and it will, of course, have state-of-the-art technology and operability. Us, anyway, as staff, it's going to be real convenient just to walk across the street. We'll figure out your parking that date approaches. It may be as soon as August. That's probably optimistic, but I really hope that next November's meeting we will have the new venue. The awards today are going to be the second from FY 2022 appropriations, provided that you approve the recommendations before you. There are 74 that come to about $113 million that will leave about $126 million on the table for awards later this year. So you don't need to worry about there being sufficient money yet to cover the proposed recommendations. With respect to personnel, I do have a couple of introductions, and I call out your name, please raise your hand. But the first, Amaka Achukwa. Did I get that right? Achukwu. Okay. All right. I apologize for that. But she's been with us for a while, but has moved to permanent staff on the accounting team, and she is going to be instrumental on Heidi McConnell's team as we go forward. We're really glad to have her on a permanent basis. In addition to that, though not all of these people are new, because of some of the changes that have been going on in information technology, I want to call to your attention, and they may be skulking in the back room, but somewhere here we have Shannon Cusick. I think all of you are going to be familiar with that name. Kevin Schuler over here is with us. Is Robert here? Robert Parkhurst? They're all skulking in the back, and maybe Michael Bedford, who is new to the team. But I want to call these individuals out because, as you know, we're having a turnover in the management of IT and rigorous implementation of the internal audit. and these people have really stepped up to the plate as we address those issues. In fact, as far as I, as the agency director, can tell, there's not been a whole lot of bumps in the road up to this point. We do have a new trick here. As we've reported to you folks previously, I asked Product Development Review Council member Dr. Christine Switterick, I hope I got her name right too, to serve as a board observer for CPRIT grantee OncoNano Medicine. This is the initial CPRIT board observer position that we will evaluate, and we will evaluate the experience to determine whether this is an option we want to continue as we go forward with more of our funded companies in the future. Her current honorary contract was increased by $2,500 per quarter to reflect the additional work associated with preparing for and attending quarterly meetings of the OncoNano board, as well as other necessary board and subcommittee meetings. If we decide to continue to use peer review council members as board observers, I will propose standard changes to our honoraria policy in order to reflect these additional duties. I also, yesterday, I believe it was, sent to you folks a link to our 2021 CPRIT annual report. This continues the policy that was begun last year of doing it exclusively online with no hard copies provided. I don't know if you've had a chance to drill down on it, but I am quite pleased. It's a considerable expansion on what we had last year, with a whole lot more grantee stories. Yes, thank you. You could have done without the letter from the CEO, but the point is taken. That's what you'll see when you call it up. But there's a lot of more grantee examples and stories that are in there, interactive features and videos that I think expand on what we're doing. Although many members of the staff contributed to the document, without doubt a special shout out has to go to Kristen, who took the lead on the project, Shannon Cusick again, Mark Lepler, our new communications officer, and Danielle De La Paz, who has worked with us. And I expect you will be quite pleased as you play with that on the web. The next topic I want to cover is the event that occurred at the November meeting, though we were already at the staff level planning to drill down on the issue, and that is to evaluate the status of the product development program, particularly with respect to, at that time, a clear reduction in the number of applicants, qualified applicants that can get through the rigorous peer review process. Since that time, I'm pleased, and Dr. Walker-Peach will probably report this as well, that we received 34 applications for the upcoming review cycle, the second one in 2022, and that is a tad higher than what we had been experienced previously. So maybe, emphasis on maybe, the decline was COVID-related or some other anomaly. But nonetheless, as your director, and I think has been clearly articulated by the Oversight Committee previously, we'd like to have more product development awards. I know Dr. Rosenfeld for sure would like to have some more, but I too, and others on the staff. So we're taking a deep dive into that. Immediately, literally the week after the November OC meeting, I convened a working group of senior staff members to take a look at all the different aspects of the program to see what can be done. We, of course, think, typical committee fashion. We started tossing out ideas, maybe this, maybe that, and came up with frankly, not so exciting list of suggestions, but focused largely on what is near term, what is longer term that we can do to increase the applications. As we were working on that, one of the members of the committee raised, I think, a critical point that there are some fundamental threshold questions that we need to revisit, particularly as a staff and as an organization, to reaffirm that this is what we want to do, or this is a way to look at the problems that we've got, and we kind of need to come to a consensus as to what direction we ought to take on this particular issue before we can engage outside stakeholders, which is impending. Outside stakeholders, in this case being you folks, members of the OC committee, grantees that have gone through the process, grantees that have not been given an award that have gone through the process, area economic development organizations, our peer review members. You get the sense there, but we wanted to come to grips with these 7 or 8 fundamental questions as we engage in those interviews. I will say that very early on, we met with Dr. Rosenfeld and Dr. Rice. Dr. Rosenfeld pounced on me almost immediately after the November OC meeting, wanting to give his thoughts. So I wanted to capture those, and Dr. Rice, in his inimitable fashion, I think gave us 50 ideas, something along those lines, that we went through. But each one of you will be contacted for us to talk to you individually. You can read the memo. I'm not going to go into it in any more depth, but I do want to stress the point about the threshold program questions. And that is that I feel very strongly that we must have 100% consensus as to the answers, at least with the CPRIT staff, to these questions in order to strengthen the program. We can't have internally pushing and pulling or disagreement that this is what we need to do. And not that I sense that there is that, but it is I think just key that we all recognize that this is what the organization wants to pursue. I think that we, as your professional staff who eat, drink, and sleep this stuff on a daily basis, need to come up with answers to those. And I think we're very close to doing that with all of them. And then we will present them to you as our suggestions and your input, but we feel that we're in a good position to help lead the board as we go forward. Just to give a sense of what these questions are to the audience and those that are following along online, there's the old question of where is it along the product development continuum do we want to fund? I frequently refer to our space as being the valley of death where good ideas go to die for lack of funding. This is what I've articulated to legislators and others as our space. This is where private sector generally does not fund, and as a public organization that we should be in this space. Another key question is the last one, which we really have not dealt with specifically, and that is what is the level of investment risk that is acceptable to this agency? Well, we need to define that level of risk, and then we need to be able to articulate that to the peer reviewers so that they can use that as a tool as they evaluate the awards that are coming before them. Just though I kind of resisted the thought of doing this, I'm going to give you a sense, because we have, these have been pretty rigorous discussions, and we do have some innovative ideas. And one of them is to shift to what we are calling for the time being a pod concept in product development. This would not affect the individual RFA mechanisms that we have, but it would affect how we go about evaluating the applications as they come in. And just very quickly, we would reduce the number of reviewers that ultimately touch the award to about 7 or 8 or 9, somewhere in that range. And those reviewers would follow that application from beginning all the way through the peer review council itself, where its recommendation comes to the pick. We think we can speed up the process by using this process, but we can also make sure that there are specific reviewers knowledgeable about the subject content of that application. Ultimately, this will require more peer reviewers because we'll all be focusing individually on grants, but with for each reviewer, a fewer number of applications to review. We feel that we place a lot of burden on the Product Development Review Council, I think more so than we do the other two review councils, so we think this might lighten their load. This is not a done deal yet. We are talking to our third-party contractor about the feasibility of doing it. To this point, we've gotten nothing but pretty positive responses to it, but we do have issues to address. But I bring that up to you because I'm not coming forward with concrete answers to the problems today, but we are working on it, and we are committed to finishing it. My last item that I want to address, begins on page 2.8, and this is the statutorily required report I have to make on the merit and progress of our 3 programs required in state law. As occurred last year and the year before, I am pleased to report that despite the problems confronted by COVID-19, all of our programs have had remarkable growth and have been meeting the purposes for which they are created. Again, the details are in this memo. Like last year, there's a lot of really good stuff in this memo that you folks can use. And after this meeting, I intend to give this broad circulation among a group of people that I always try and broadcast the good news about CPRIT. With that, Dr. Patel, I'll close and I'll try and respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Are there any questions for me? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr.
Let me ask one quick
question.
question.
Please.
When you talk about that reviewer process to go all the way through, are they to be an analyst or an advocate?
That's an interesting question. I think, actually, good question for the program chiefs to talk about, but my initial reaction is they would start out as an analyst evaluating it, but as it moves forward, I think they would become an advocate.
I would like to take the opportunity on behalf of the Oversight Committee to thank Ms. Shannon Cusack, Mark Loeffler, and Kristen Doyle for the annual report. I was looking through it last night.
It's pretty, isn't it?
Thank you very much.
Except for that initial CEO report picture.
The Chair recognizes Mr. Burgess to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report.
Dr. Patel, Oversight Committee members, let's get on to some exciting things now. Let's go to tab 3. Behind tab 3, you'll find the compliance program update. I will be brief. I know we have a lot going on in our meeting today. My report highlights most of our compliance activities over the past 3 months to implement our grant monitoring plan with on-site reviews and desk reviews. We are planning our first series of this calendar year for our grantee training, and we're totally revamping that training and making it even more exciting than it has been in the past. But we're getting feedback from program staff and operations staff, and really trying to make that a little more engaging. It's a tough sell sometimes, but we do try to make that fun as possible. And lastly, I wanted to point out on page 3-1, as you recall, we monitor delinquent reporting. We receive on average 560 reports every month. And we have established for ourselves a kind of a self-imposed threshold of 5% reporting to kind of monitor, gauge that. And the end of July, we kind of went over that slightly. We went up to maybe 6.4%, and so red flags went off and everything. But these are the types of systems that I think are important to monitor even the slightest change, so we can address these things and they don't become systemic. So of the 36 reports that were delinquent, 28 is kind of the magic number. We were at 36. 60% of those were from one grantee. So we looked at the data. We've had some internal discussion with our grantee staff, grant accountant staff, and we've reached out to the grantee. We are developing a training, an ad hoc training, and we're going to require the grantee to let's sit together, let's look at the issues. Reportedly, this grantee's had some significant turnover. There's been some misclassification of expenses and back and forth, and so things haven't been submitted on time. But we are addressing that and really want to provide solid technical assistance to that. That's all that I have for my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Burgess?
I have a suggestion.
Yes, sir.
They have comedy, defensive driving schools. You could mirror it after one of those.
I love that. Pizza, comedy, and compliance. There we go.
Mr. Margot, are you available for that?
No.
Vince, a real quick question. Who's responsible at is it the administrator or is it, say, the tech transfer office? Ultimate responsibility to make sure that's
Great question. So ultimately, the way that we're set up, it's the authorized signing official that is identified when the grant begins, and that's typically in the sponsored programs office director, or usually not the PI. That's ultimately responsible ASO.
None. We'll proceed, Ms. Burgess. Turning to the certification of the award slate that we will consider today, Mr. Burgess will provide the compliance certification report for the academic research, product development.
My compliance certification is in the proposed grant award booklet beginning on page 97. And in that report, I detailed every step in the certification process. That was made available to you in the portal. The memo is dated February the 3rd. After thorough review of all the supporting documentation and in consultation with CPRIT staff and GDIT staff, our third-party grants administrator, I'm satisfied that the peer review process followed agency administrative rules and applicable laws, and I certify these award recommendations for your consideration.
Are there any questions for Ms. Burgess? Thank you very much for that scintillating report. I won't suffer from insomnia now. The Chair recognizes Dr. LeBeau to provide the Academic Research Program update and introduce the Program Integrations Committee's grant award recommendations.
Good morning, Dr. Patel. I'm delighted to present the proposed grant award packet put forward by the Program Integration Committee based on the recommendations of the Scientific Review Council. And I'll refer you to tab 4 of the booklet, as well as page 6 of the proposed grant awards. Today we'll be reviewing the FY22 Review Cycle 1 and Recruitment Cycle 22, 4, 5, and 6, and this includes 65 awards from 8 grant mechanisms that total $93.6 million. And this is displayed in Table 1 on page 6 of your booklet and on we had a, can you go back to the slide set, please? We had a very robust response to the IRA awards. We had 403 IRAs submitted, and based on the peer review focusing on scientific excellence, the reviewers recommended to the SRC 59 awards, totaling $70 million. And 6 recruitment, $24 million. If you go to the next slide, please. Page 7 of your packet, Table 2. Pleased to say that these awards cover all of the CPRIT priorities as shown here in the table. They include a broad range of investigator-initiated research projects, the priorities of prevention and early detection, childhood and adolescent cancers, access to trials, computational disparities, hepatocellular cancer, and recruiting outstanding cancer research. Moving to a discussion of the IRAs in a bit more detail, if you turn to tables 3 through 7, thank you. And we'll start with Table 3. 42 individual research awards have been recommended. And this was a very rewarding portfolio because it covers the breadth of cancer biology and translation. And it recommends a number of high-priority and emerging fields, such as metabolism, for which therapies are amenable, as well as artificial intelligence for image analysis, early diagnosis, and understanding the early stages of tumor initiation. In Table 4, 7 awards for cancer in children and adolescents were recommended, and these again cover the continuum from risk assessment to prevention to pathogenesis, and therapy. The Table 5 on page 12, you see the awards that are recommended for computational and systems biology. And these cover using medical modeling to understand progression, response, and prediction of response to therapy, as well as understanding tumor heterogeneity. Response to therapy. Table 6 shows the award recommended for clinical translation on page 13, and the award again addresses pediatric therapies are needed, and that's acute myeloid leukemia and relapse. This is a very exciting genomic-based precision medicine trial, genomic profile, randomizing. The last category is Table 7, in which 6 awards were recommended for prevention and early detection. And these were, I think, a very good mix of HPV assessment, identifying new biomarkers, imaging, and early diagnosis, cancer screening in high-risk adolescents.
Any questions? Hearing none, please.
first to the Established Investigator Awards, and you'll find those on pages. And the first candidate is, first let me say that of the 6 candidates that are recommended, the disciplines that are covered, 2 of the individuals specialize in computational biology, 2 are imaging scientists, 1 chemist, and 1 engineer. 3 of the 6 work focuses on developing new. First category I'll cover is the Established Investigator. Is Dr. Reuben, and Dr. Harris is recommended for an Established Investigator Award to support his UT Health San Antonio. He'll be appointed as the Ewing Halsell President's Council Chair and Professor, serve as the new chair of the Department of Biology. And he is an investigator of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and his appointment has just been renewed, and his transfer of his Dr. Harris is a pioneer in finding a new area of mutagenesis research. He discovered a novel function for a family of enzymes called APOBEC. And these enzymes were thought to previously modify only RNA, but he just modified DNA. And it turns out that they can mutate, cause mutations in DNA that account for the vast majority of the landscape of mutations common in virtually all tumors. And he is involved in defining these mechanisms, but importantly, developing novel cancer therapeutics. And what he proposes to do is to uncover novel synthetic lethal interactions that involve the APOBEC pathway and that can be developed into new therapies. And just to remind you, synthetic lethal interactions is a cellular state where you have a combination of deficiencies or altered function of 2 or more proteins that can lead. This is a very exciting area of research, but just to close on this one, I'll say that as the new department chair, he will have the opportunity to recruit new faculty in San Antonio, and this will help meet their goal, their express goal of becoming a national powerhouse in drug discovery. He will also take extensive advantage of the CPRIT's innovative drug discovery. Candidate, Angela Bagnato, who's recommended for an Established Investigator from the University of Sao Paulo. And that, I believe, would be our first recruit in America. And he is an esteemed scientist and engineer who trained at MIT and has been running a major research center in Brazil where he's developed optical techniques and tools to study cancer. And he's actually translated his work to several major clinical trials in photodynamic therapy. An elected member of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, an exceedingly rare honor for international. The overarching goal of his work is to develop low-cost technologies for treating melanoma by combining photons, light, and photosensitizers, chemical agents. And he's focusing on acrolitigenous melanoma prevalent in individuals with pigmented skin, more unfortunately is currently resistant of immunotherapy. Although he is new to a faculty appointment in Texas, he's a visiting professor and he also has established Rice University. I'll just proceed through unless. The third Established Investigator is Dr. Charles Quayles, who is an international leader in magnetic resonance imaging and positron emission tomography. And he uses these techniques to develop advanced neuro-oncologic imaging methods and that can inform novel image-guided response assessment in surgical applications. And he is being proposed for an established investigator award by MD Anderson. As a senior neuroimaging scientist, Dr. Qualls really brings a wealth of expertise in quantitative imaging and a lot of connectivity to the international community. For example, he is a leader in the quantitative imaging network at the NCI, so he brings all of these connections and opportunities for research programs to MD Anderson and to Texas. He'll be extending his current research focus on advanced perfusion MRI and quantitative MRI PET analysis, learning, and biomarker analysis in the imaging sciences. And his goal is to continue to develop cutting-edge preclinical and clinical imaging technologies that can accelerate cancer research and neuro-oncologic drugs. That completes the established investigators. The next category is the Recruitment of Rising Stars Award, and there is a single candidate here, Dr. Allison Fout, who is been put forth by Texas A&M University. Dr. Fout is an inorganic chemist who's already extremely accomplished and has won a number of awards. And she has expertise in catalysis and sustainability science. And her recruitment, I think, would have a very transformative effect on the Department of Chemistry at Texas A&M, because she has been developing very novel techniques and has become a leader in technology for the hyperpolarization of gases to be used in imaging, which are currently used in imaging. And she proposes to develop hydrogen as a imaging probe for MRI and PET. And the current technology currently uses carbon-13, so she'll be developing new technology. And her approach is, she plans to apply these approaches to develop novel cancer detection. The last two candidates are in the category of tenure track faculty awards, and they are both computational biology. Dr. Z. Tan is being recruited as an assistant professor in the Department of Pharmacology and Chemical Biology and Center for Drug Discovery at Baylor College of Medicine. He's a very talented computational biologist and bioinformatician and molecular modeler. And he will apply artificial intelligence and deep learning techniques combined with molecular biology to target novel proteins, the MEK5 kinase, which he has found to be linked to poor cancer. And he will use this to develop cancer therapies. Baylor, as we've previously, is investing in growing a program in drug discovery and the development of new cancer therapies, and he will contribute. The last candidate is Dr. Marion Collaxey, who is recommended for a first-time tenure track award for his recruitment from Harvard Medical School to the University of the Anderson Cancer Center. Dr. Collaxey has developed a very powerful new pipeline to study proteins that is called sensitive proximity proteomics. And this is a method by which cellular receptors, which studies how cellular receptors interact with nearby proteins. And he has applied this approach to unravel the precise choreography of signaling events at receptors, and has found that it provides unprecedented temporal and spatial resolution. Proposes to study two major aims, both of which have the goal of improving the efficacy of cancer immunotherapy. And the first is to determine which proteins participate in cancer-relevant immune checkpoint receptor signals through phosphorylation, again using this new technique of proximity proteomics. and then secondly, to study the immune checkpoint signaling in the tumor microenvironment, to study how cells in the microenvironment alter this response. He wants to use both of these studies to identify proteins that use for therapeutic. So that completes our.
Thank you. So, any questions from the Oversight Committee? Please.
Morning. Point of clarification on your number 7, your rising star. I'm just curious, how did you guys come up with the award of $1,999,661 versus around $2 million?
But they requested.
Is that how it's based? All right, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Researchers have certified compliance for the academic research award process. It is my understanding that Dr. Rosenfeld has reported a conflict of interest with one academic research application presented today, grant ID number RP220145. Are there any conflicts of interest that members have not reported already? Hearing none. Members, you have the list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the academic research grant awards. We will approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 the Oversight Committee members agree. There are 8 academic research award slates constituting 65 grant recommendations. Rather than taking a separate vote on each grant mechanism, I'll ask for a vote to approve all of these. If a member wants to consider one or more award recommendations separately from the vote on all the slate, please make a motion to do so now. Hearing none, I will first entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the applications that Dr. Rosenfeld has indicated a conflict of interest. This is the Individual Investor Award for RP220145.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members present and able to vote, the motion carries. I note for the record that Dr. Rosenfeld did not vote. We'll now entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the following mechanisms: Individual Investor Research Awards, Individual Investor Research Awards for Cancer in Children and Adolescents, Individual Investigator Research Awards for the Computational Systems Biology of Cancer, Individual Investigator Research Awards for Clinical Translation, Individual Research Awards for Prevention and Early Detection, recruitment of first-time tenure-track faculty members, recruitment of rising stars, and recruitment of established investigators.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Chair recognizes Ms. Maggot to provide the Chief Prevention Officer's report and present the PIC's recommendations for prevention awards.
Pleased to present the prevention awards. Or cycle 12 found in your proposed grant award booklet on page 46. Recommending 7 projects for your consideration today. From the expansion cancer prevention services mechanism, and 1 is from the prevention program assessment. As you can see, all projects address 1 or more of the prevention program priorities. Briefly go through the 7 projects. First project is leveraging Passport for Care to reduce childhood cancer survivorship outcomes disparities from Baylor College of Medicine. Focus of this web-based decision support tool is the Rio Grande Valley Award. Dr. Rahman of Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center will expand the access to breast and cervical care for West Texas to include the Permian Basin this time, and while maintaining services in the Panhandle, South Plains, and the Alliance for Colorectal Cancer is a screening project directed by Dr. Foxhall of MD Anderson Center. This project will expand to work with clinics in 60 counties. MD Anderson committed to providing significant support for this program. Indicated they would pay for all of the FIT. Another colorectal cancer screening and diagnostics program directed by Dr. Jason McKnight, University Health Science Center, is being recommended this morning. Project trains family medicine residents to perform colonoscopy, and this project will expand to include hepatitis C testing for residents in the. Next slide, Kevin. The Empower Her to Care expansion project of the Rose is it's a nonprofit organization in Houston. It will provide breast cancer screening and access to the continuum care in a 43-county service area, utilizing its 4 mobile mammography coaches. Final project in the expansion mechanism is Dr. Schick's project of the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. The project focuses on hepatitis B and prevention and screening, both of which are known risk factors for liver cancer. And this project will focus on those experiencing homelessness in South Texas. Finally, one prevention program assessment project from the Health Institute. This project will use both quantitative and qualitative research. It will allow CPRIT to understand reach and impact of the prevention program. Those are the 7 awards. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for the committee with Dr. Rosenfeld?
When I look at the awards, we award for breast cancer screening. All the prevention screening service.
Several of the projects that we funded in the past do multiple trainings. That is it's responsive to the RFA, and that would be acceptable to do that. I know that for the cost, sometimes they have to choose. And breast and cervical is covered by, often covered by other programs, including the Medicaid program. So that's one that people, tend not to ask for CPRIT dollars to cover.
Wondered if the liver cancer prevention award was in any way coordinated with the liver collaboration center that Baylor, I think for Baylor a couple of years ago.
I am not sure. It was not in their application, but I can certainly connect them with Dr. El-Sarraj and his.
Hernandez?
I just wanted to clarify. When you said Texas A&M is going to be expanding their family residency program as far as what they're doing, they're going to be doing colonoscopies, or they're offering colonoscopies for the population?
The program trains family medicine residents to perform colonoscopies. The idea is so they can serve patients in the rural counties that might not have an endoscopy center.
Thank you. Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the prevention award process. It's my understanding that no Oversight Committee members have reported any conflicts of interest in pension applications presented today. Are there conflicts of interest that members have not already reported? Members, you have the list of applications and grant awards amounts recommended by the PIC for the Prevention Grant Awards. We will approve the PIC's recommendation if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members agree. There are 2 Prevention Award slates constituting 7 grant applications. Rather than taking a separate vote on each grant mechanism, I will ask for a vote to approve all the slates. If a member wants to consider one or more award recommendations separately from the vote on all the slates, please make a motion to do so. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the expansion of cancer prevention services to rural and medically underserved populations slate and the prevention program assessment slate.
Move.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Members, closing out our action items. Members, closing out our action items for the prevention program, I will entertain a motion approving the proposed fiscal year 2023 RFAs presented by Ms. Madden. Have you presented them? I thought you had.
No, I just went through the awards.
Well, I just want to make the chats go on the merry way. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me.
Are we ready now? Okay. I'd like you to turn your attention to tab 5 of your program book or meeting book. And firstly, I promised the prevention subcommittee last week that I would report on the number of applications received. The application cycle closed last week, and 16 applications were received. Those will be peer-reviewed in April and then presented for your recommendation, for your approval in August. So I'd now like to move on to the 3 proposed RFAs for FY 2023, and those are starting on page 5.2 of your book. The first is not a new RFA, it's a revision to the dissemination of CPRIT-funded cancer prevention and control interventions. The Review Council added a requirement to pilot test the project or the resource, or before it was optional, but many of the grantees who have received this award said there wasn't enough time or enough money to actually pilot test whatever their materials. So the Review Council has recommended upping the years from 2 to 3 and upping the funding amount from $300,000 to $450,000. The next 2 RFAs are being proposed are new ones, and after receiving input and guidance from both the Review Council and the Advisory Committee, the 2 RFAs are now the primary prevention of cancer and the screening and early detection RFAs. Primary prevention mechanism focuses on increasing implementation of evidence-based interventions that we already know work to reduce cancer risk, disease burden, and cancer disparities, mostly through modifiable risk behaviors, some of which are tobacco use, physical inactivity, alcohol use, sun exposure, and environmental cancer exposures. The full list is presented in. This mechanism is specifically designed to have broad appeal for entities such as smaller health departments, clinics, and other smaller organizations which may not have the infrastructure and not be equipped to implement the more comprehensive screening and diagnostic project. Those projects, the screening and diagnostics, are the focus of the Screening and Early Detection RFA. And these are comprehensive projects that address public and professional education, outreach, navigation and delivery of clinical services, and then navigation to diagnosis and cancer treatment as needed, as well as systems improvements. Projects bring together coordinated networks of public health and community partners to carry out the proposed programs in their communities. This concludes my presentation of the proposed RFAs for FY 2023, and I'm happy to address any questions.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, I'm awfully sorry to the Prevention Committee. I sort of had a time-space disruption take place. Now I can say this. Members, closing out our action items for the prevention program, I will entertain a motion approving the proposed fiscal year 2023 RFAs presented by Ms. Najid.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Moving on to agenda item 9, Dr. Walker Peach will provide the product development program update and introduce the PICS grant award recommendations for the product development research grants. Thank you.
Good morning, members. You will find the product development research report behind tab. Slide, please. In February of 2021, the OC approved the release of the product development research RFAs as outlined on this. Both FY 22.1 and 22. As a brief reminder, the RFAs support cancer-focused startups with a seed award of up to $3 million over 3 years and early-stage cancer-focused mechanisms, $20 million over 3 years. The difference to awards is where the company is located. Texco applicants are already in the state of Texas, whereas Relco applicants are willing to relocate if they were to receive. The next slide, please. So Product Development Research, or PDR, opened the portal to accept applications for 22.1 in June of last year and accepted applications until August of 2020. Application metrics can be seen here on this slide. We received 13 applications for Texco, 3 Relco, and 6. The PDRC, the PIC, and the PDR subcommittee have recommended 2 applications for awards, which I'll discuss shortly. If these 2 were to be approved by the OC, the funding success rate for 22.1 would be 15.4%. The overall success rate for product development research over 7 years, review cycles, 22.1 is 8.6. May I have the next slide, please? We launched our standard RFAs again for 22.2. We opened the portal late last year in December of 21 and closed them early this year in January 26. May I have the next slide, please? We are very pleased with the uptick in applications as noted in this slide for 22. The average number of applications received over the last 7 years is 23.4 applications. So 34 applications does represent a 30%. Cohort is about evenly split between small company seed awards. There are 16 of those, and early stage applicants, Relco, 10 Texco, and 8 Relco. Any recommended applications would come to pause for questions at Are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Hearing none.
I'll move forward now. If y'all would please turn to, have the next slide, please, Kevin. If y'all would please now turn to page 60 in the award booklet. I'm talking about recommendations, and I will outline the 2. The award recommendations for 22.1 include Ares Immunotherapy, DP20016, for positive CD26 CAR T cell therapy for mesothelioma. Proposed budget is $2,998,200. This is a C award recommendation. Current location of the company is in Georgia. They're in Cartersville, Georgia. Relocate to the Houston Technology is a mesothelin-specific CAR T therapy. It is a platform technology for many cancer types. The underlying technology was developed at the medical unit. However, their primary disease indication is active malignant glioma. Funds will be for critical and scalable manufacturing and scale-up, IND-enabling studies, and the initiation of a Phase 1 clinical trial. There are several contract contingencies outlined in the memo for this particular award recommendation. They fall into two categories, the first of which is goals and objectives as originally proposed, or additions from our reviewers. And the second category are really legal matters with licenses, as well as understanding the relationship between the R&D. Pause there, see if there are any award recommendations.
Please, Dr. Hernandez.
They're planning to relocate to Texas. Their timetable and specific, if you can, at this point, expand on what do you mean, what are they relocating exactly to Texas?
So CPRIT rules allow a company to take a year to relocate into Texas.
What exactly are they relocating here? What are they moving here?
They would move their company here, probably.
Their entire company?
This is a seed awardee.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty small.
Okay, thank you.
Is this the first time we've had a seed awardee as a relo, quote unquote?
I believe that is the case, yes.
Any further questions? Hearing none, please, Doctor.
Slide, please. Okay, award recommendation number 2, Iterion Therapeutics, DP20019. Okay, development of a second-generation transducin beta-like protein, BTL inhibitor, inhibitor being the operative word there. This, again, is a seed award recommendation for $2,999,990, currently located in the Houston L1 inhibitor that leverages what the company has already understood about their target, to a novel, structurally distinct drug candidate that can be orally administered. Underlying technology was developed by the company. Disease indication right now is this can be used for several. However, the focus of the award is to understand what funds will be for performing screening to identify potential lead candidates, conduct the analyses necessary to understand, characterize the compound's activity, and nominate finally a clinical. There are no contract contingencies for this. And Iterion is the second time they won a $15.9 million CPRIT product development award in 2024 called in regard to desmoid 2. That I complete the award recommendations for F.
Questions, Dr. Rice?
I was just wondering if you could tell us again, did you say that was 23.4 was the average number of cycle applications heretofore the last several years?
That's correct.
Then I think
that's 12 review cycles.
There's 34. So my math, I think, says that this is a 47% increase in the number of applications.
Right. It's up there.
So it's I was just wondering if the have a theory of why that is. Because that's obviously one of the things we've been talking about is how do you get more applications, and we have a 50% bump, and I'm not sure if we've talked about it per se, and why would, I don't know that COVID would necessarily drive that, but we have a 50% increase, which would absolutely be fulfilling the goal of the whole conversation earlier, or at least part of it. I wonder what we think about that.
So I think outreach is an important element, interacting with and in the ecosystem. We took a little bit of a hiatus during COVID as well for being able to do that in a face-to-face. And as a result, it consumes a lot more easily. In some ways, our interactions have. I do believe that the dip that we saw last time, the 13, result of people thinking And now we're 2 years into the pandemic, or 2.5 years. Now I've heard something that says,
Thank you. Dr. Cummings?
I'm sorry, not to beat a dead horse about the first one, Ares Immunology, but since they're a seed and a relo, what process is in place as they are presenting their invoices for compliance, for reimbursement, and so forth? Should they not move to Texas, what is the recourse? What is our policy? Is it following the same relo policies that we have?
exactly the same.
Okay.
Hearing no further questions, Mr. Burgess has certified compliance of the product development award process. It is my understanding that no member has reported a conflict of interest. With the proposed product development and award recommendations, are there any conflicts of interest not reported? Hearing none, members, you have the applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the 2 product development research grant awards. The Oversight Committee will approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 of the members agree. We will consider the 2 proposed awards in one vote unless an Oversight Committee member wishes to take up the recommendation separately. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for product development research awards to the ACES, Immunology, and Interion Therapeutics as presented by Dr. Walker, Ph.
Move.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and the CPRIT staff, and to authorize the CEO to sign award contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Members, Mr. Roberts notified the board on February 10th that he seeks authority to disperse grant awards in advance to the 2 companies we have just approved for awards. Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts regarding this request? Hearing none, pursuant to the General Appropriations Act, Article 9, Section 4.02A, do I have a motion to authorize CPRIT to disburse grant awards of funds via the advance payments to Ares Immunotherapy and Interion Therapeutics upon execution of the award grants and successful completion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Members, we are going to take up agenda item 11 next. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present his appointment to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committees.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. I appointed 1 expert to the product development stable of peer reviewers. Our statute requires your approval of these appointments. Members of the Board Governance Subcommittee reviewed the qualifications of the appointee at their February 3rd meeting, as did the Product Development Subcommittee. Although 2 members that attended the governance meeting, were supportive of approving the appointment, the meeting lacked a quorum to vote for a formal recommendation to the Oversight Committee. Therefore, I recommend your approval of this appointment.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts for the Board Governance Subcommittee? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve Dr. Jane Williams' appointment to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committee?
So moved.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. The chair recognizes Ms. Eckel. Sorry. We'll take a 5-minute break then. This been a slight change in plans in that we will start with item 13. And the chair recognizes Ms. Eckel to discuss the proposed administrative rule changes under agenda item 13. Ms. Eckel?
Good morning, members. The rules are located behind tab 10 of your meeting books. We have both a final order and a new proposed rule amendment. I'll start with the final order, which is to Chapter 703, specifically 703.26. We reviewed this at the November meeting, and the rule change was published in the Texas Register in December. We did not receive any public comments. This is a rule change related to clinical trial participation costs, adding parking, and then some other non-substantive changes to the rule. And then if it's approved today, we'll file the final order with the Secretary of State for it to become final. And unless there are any questions, I'll move on to the new proposed rule change. This new proposed rule change is to Section 703.17, and it begins the rulemaking process over again. The proposed amendment relates to CPRIT's revenue sharing terms, and specifically CPRIT's option to take equity in a grantee. This rule came about because usually if CPRIT takes equity in a grantee, it will advance the full amount of the grant award to the grantee, and this can impact the reporting requirement due dates of the grantee, like the matching, compliance, certification, and verification that grantees are required to submit. So for the sake of transparency, we wanted to add the option in this administrative rule change that if CPRIT does take equity in a company and then may adjust the required reporting due dates, it will be posted, or it will be included in the grant contract, as well as any additional consequences for the grantee if it does not meet the adjusted reporting requirements. And so if it's approved today, we'll move forward with publication in the Texas Register and then bring this rule back at the May meeting with any public comments.
Are there any questions?
This just gives us more flexibility, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay, I understand that. I do have a question on the first one you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
On the parking reimbursement, are we concerned about any abuse there? Okay.
Any further questions? Being done. Members, there is a motion to approve the final order adopting rule changes to the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 703, and to approve the publication of the proposed change to 703 in the Texas Register.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. Now, moving back to item 12, I recognize Mr. Roberts to present the presiding officer's new appointment to the Prevention Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. As reported a few minutes ago, the Board Governance Subcommittee discussed an additional topic, your specific appointment to the Prevention Advisory Committee. Although the two members that attended the meeting were supportive of approving the appointment, the meeting lacked a quorum. The appointment has been reviewed by the subcommittee. They were supportive of it, and therefore I do request approval of Dr. Hall to the Prevention Advisory Committee. Additional information about her background and qualifications begins on 9/3.
Any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve Dr. Amanda Hall's appointment to the Prevention Advisory Committee?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Members, the next several presentations will be from the Oversight Committee's advisory committees. CPRIT provided the advisory committee reports prior to the meeting, and I hope you have had a chance to review them. The chair from each advisory committee presenting today will join via Zoom. We have allocated each advisory committee 30 minutes to make their presentations and to respond to questions from the Oversight Committee members. Dr. LeBeau, please introduce Dr. Gorlick, who will provide the Advisory Committee on Childhood Cancer's annual report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Richard Gorlick, who is the Division Head and Department Chair of Pediatrics and Department Chair ad interim of Sarcoma Medical Oncology in the Division of Cancer Medicine at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. He's also the H. Grant Taylor, MD, W.W. Suto, MD, and Margaret P. Sullivan, MD, Distinguished Chair in Pediatrics. Dr. Gorlick received his medical degree from SUNY Health Sciences Center in New York and trained at New York Presbyterian and Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where he began his sarcoma research laboratory and clinical practice. His laboratory is the founding bone marrow tumor resource laboratory for the Children's Oncology Group. His molecular pharmacology laboratory is completely focused on osteosarcoma, and his lab is a member of the NCI-funded Pediatric Preclinical Testing Consortium. Dr. Gorlick is involved in clinical trials, in part as past chair of the Bone Tumor Disease Committee for the Children's Oncology Group, and he's past president of the Connective Tissue Oncology Society. He has published more than 303 peer-reviewed papers, reviews, and book chapters. We welcome Dr. Gorlick.
Thank you very much, Dr. LeBeau, for that very kind introduction. And I do have the privilege of serving as the chair of the Advisory Committee on Childhood Cancer. And I appreciate this opportunity to make this presentation on behalf of our committee. I believe also present, perhaps on Zoom, is Will Parsons, who is the vice chair of the Advisory Committee. And thank you once again for the opportunity to present. So the outline of the presentation that I'm going to give is I'm going to talk a little bit about childhood cancer in general, a little bit about childhood cancer in Texas. I'm going to talk about a summary of accomplishments. These are really the accomplishments of CPRIT, not necessarily the advisory committee, but this is a wonderful partnership to support investigations in childhood cancer. I'm going to start describing some of the problems we are trying to address as we move forward, and try to talk a little bit about a strategy for making better for childhood cancer in Texas. And then I'm going to summarize and talk about next steps. So going to childhood cancer first. So childhood cancer is the leading cause of childhood death from disease. So if you look in the United States, there are 14,000 new cases per year in the United States, and 1 in every 330 Americans will develop cancer before age 20. Childhood cancer survivors represent a growing challenge, and problem is sort of in quotes, because we're happy that there are childhood cancer survivors, but given their ongoing health issues, it creates challenges in meeting their needs. And 1 in 750 20-year-olds alive in the US today is a survivor of childhood cancer. I would like folks to start thinking about, in the spectrum of childhood cancer, incorporating the concept of adolescent and young adult cancer. So adolescents and young adults, we know, fall through cracks in medical systems, not clearly cared for by pediatric or medical oncologists. And this is a group where access to clinical trials, access to treatment is a particular challenge. If we add adolescents and young adults, who are folks 15 to 39, into childhood cancer, there's 90,000 additional adolescent and young adults. And 10% of AYAs with cancer are diagnosed and treated in Texas, and we'll come back to that later. The prevalence of cancer subtypes differ between AYAs, older adults, and children. They may have different biologies. Sometimes it's more pediatric-like, sometimes it's more adult-like. There's over 100,000 childhood and AYA survivors in Texas, and their five-year overall survival is somewhat lower than children and adults with similar conditions. And again, this is an area of opportunity where there's few studies focused on this group of patients, with Texas uniquely positioned to focus on this area. While tremendous improvements in childhood cancer have occurred, there are also cancers that still remain very challenging. So if we look at things like acute myeloid leukemia, we've made a lot of progress, but again, we're not close to 100%. If we look at things like high-risk neuroblastoma, progress is less. And for challenging brain tumors like brainstem gliomas, unfortunately, progress has been very limited. Childhood cancer survivors, I've alluded to, suffer lasting side effects from the treatment. You know, precision medicine may make this better, but if we look at all conditions that they face severe and moderate conditions in relatively high rates. Some of those issues include cardiac side effects, neurotoxicity, among many others. And AYA cancer research particularly, has many unanswered questions, meaning, there is short and long-term survival. It's not clear entirely why that is. And clearly, this patient population has unique needs, both during and after treatment. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Texas specifically. If we look at the pediatric cancer incidence in Texas compared to the United States, Texas is number 3 in childhood cancer incidence. If we look at some particular types like leukemia, particularly acute lymphocytic leukemia, we're even higher. 3 and 5 for those, 7 for ependymoma, and 9 for gliomas. When we look at the geographic representation of Texas, with darker being higher incidences, Texas is a state that's on the higher side. So the incidence of cancer in Texas in childhood is about 180 per 1 million. That compares to 174 per 1 million in the US overall, making us about 6% higher than sort of the national averages. So Texas does have a high incidence of childhood cancer. When we look at the number of kids with cancer in the state of Texas, we actually have the second most kids with cancer in the United States, just coming after California. So if you look at Texas, 9.3% of kids with cancer reside in Texas. It's almost double the third highest state, which is New York at 6.5%. And so it is a big challenge. When we look at incidence by public health region within Texas, and these slides kindly come from Michael Schur, who actually is a recipient of a pediatric core grant from CPRIT, specifically obtaining this type of data. We could see that there is variability in different regions within Texas. These are relatively smaller numbers, so I don't want to sort of posit reasons, but there is some variability. If we look at pediatric cancer survival in Texas overall, we are about the same. So if you look at the year 2000, the earliest year, the 5-year survival for the United States overall was 79.2%. The survival in Texas overall was 79.4%. So basically typical relative to the United States. That said, what this masks is there is variability in survival when we look at different regions within Texas itself. You know, I would highlight, without wanting to call too much attention to it, if we look at Region 5, which is an area with a lot of medical centers, the 5-year survival is in the 83.4% range. If we compare that to Region 11, which is at 79.7, you know, one possible reason for this variability is the availability of medical care. So I think summarizing for this part, the pediatric cancer incidence and survival, I think, does vary by public health regions in Texas. I am positing that access to care may be a factor, but I can't prove that. But there may, at the minimum, suggest mechanisms are needed to increase access, particularly to clinical trials. And I'll go back to this subsequently. I do want to start, these are sort of summarized as the advisory committee accomplishments, but really it's CPRIT. And I have to start by applauding CPRIT's commitment to childhood cancer. They've been wonderful at making childhood cancer a priority. So these aren't really the advisory committee's accomplishments. These are really the accomplishments of CPRIT. And CPRIT has been a phenomenal driver of childhood cancer research in the state. I want to emphasize very quickly some of the ways they've propelled childhood cancer research. Some of it is through funding specific research projects that are focused on childhood cancer. This is approximately 11% of the CPRIT award portfolio, which we're very grateful for. It's led to tons of publications, tons of patents. It covers every aspect of childhood cancer and is truly wonderful. You know, looking at some of the new research projects, tackling big projects, big problems. You know, one of them is, you know, Michael Schur's work that I've already alluded to. I don't want to spend time going through any of these in detail, but these are really high impact, you know, projects and wonderful programs. One of the things that's really helped pediatrics is in the core facilities, allowing an application from each center that's specific to pediatrics. These core facilities have served as nodes that have really brought together cancer investigation throughout the state. And the multiplier effect is way beyond just the support that was given to these cores. These cores truly make all of the research feasible and are spread throughout the state and are wonderful programs. CPRIT supports the arrival of new childhood cancer researchers. And, you know, this again just brings new talent and is a wonderful program. I do want to mention one thing that CPRIT has partnered with, and this is really the Researchers Roundup. This was a meeting held in 2020. This was around the time I took over the advisory committee and was instrumental in trying to develop strategies. This is really successful because of Annette Leslie, who is the leader of the Carson Leslie Foundation, she is part of the CPRIT Advisory Committee, and our energy and advocacy are just infectious and really help all of us achieve our mission. Again, I'm going to come back to this because we are planning a meeting in 2022, which I think is important. So where are we going really starts tackling the challenges we continue to face. If we put forward a vision, we're trying to improve the patient experience, quality of life, and long-term survival of children in Texas diagnosed with cancer. One of the challenges we face is the distribution of pediatric cancer care in Texas. Again, this just breaks the centers into large, medium, and small. Just showing that concentration of larger and medium-sized programs is towards the eastern part of the state, extending into the middle, but not really to the west, south, or north. If we look at disparities in AYA care and outcomes, clearly, it's already been shown that, treatment location impacts survival, access to care influences access to services that are important to them. We know enrollment in clinical trials is very, very poor, showing in the bar graph on the bottom, the enrollment on NCI trials in that middle age range. And this is a challenging group. And it's not really hard to say that, pediatric care closer to home is better. Obviously, families traveling from their support systems, create challenges. So the key is really, how do we get the state-of-the-art care closer to them? So how will we get where we want to go? And, before I talk about new initiatives, I really want to talk about, we need to continue to support the things that already work. Obviously, the individual research awards, the faculty recruitment awards, the cores, the MIRA projects, these are all outstanding and are critically important for continued discovery in childhood cancer. The core facilities, I want to emphasize, having a pediatric-specific core has had an immense impact. This has developed childhood cancer models. It's increased capacity for data storage and sharing, and I hope these calls continue. But that said, we're trying to enhance our strategy. And one of the things we wanted to be able to do is to understand in a greater way what needs to be done geographically, as well as in the different topics that childhood cancer sort of deals with. So, I tend to be a collaborative type. And if I was going to try to sort of define a strategy, I think the first step is not defining the strategy and bringing together a group that'll actually accomplish that. A collective group is smarter than an individual. And so we formed 9 subcommittees to try to tackle different areas, as well as just the issue of representation across the state. A few of the members were added to the parent committee. Some of these were added to enhance representation throughout the state, to enhance advocacy, which were a critical driver of our activities. But even beyond that, the group that's actually engaged of Texas, all Texas investigators, expanded even way beyond that. And what we created is this structure where the parent committee helps guide a series of steering committees in different areas. And I will highlight that the Frontiers group is the name chosen by them, but is really about geographic issues within the state of Texas, specifically enhancing representation of those small programs that serve large geographic areas. I think the concept that we've arrived at is, we think in some way creating a clinical trials network within the state of Texas is a critical step for improving survival and survivorship in the state. And obviously that could be framed in the context of a funding announcement. There are many potential opportunities. These could be about targeted agents. They could be about spread of new technology. They can be about follow-up. They can be understanding sort of unique challenges of AYA patients. This isn't really specific to what has to be done. It's a belief that clinical trials will improve outcomes. The belief that clinical trials improve survival is really intrinsic in the makeup of pediatric oncologists. I started with some of the negatives in pediatrics, areas where we still haven't made progress, but ALL is sort of the prototype of advancement made through systemic clinical trials, meaning year after year, clinical trials have made the survival of patients with ALL better and better, approaching the 95% that we now sort of see for patients afflicted with this disease. This includes survival. It develops new treatment strategies. And although controversial, peds oncologists will frequently believe that participation in trials just through standardization of care improves outcomes. Clearly, things could build off of some existing infrastructures. Some of them exist around adolescent and young adult cancer. Again, a tremendous opportunity. So at the very beginning, I focused on the research roundup, so showing a slide on this. We anticipate having another meeting July 24th to 26th, 2022 in Dallas. What we're hoping is that each of these subgroups will present their ideas on the highest priority clinical trials for the state of Texas. We hope that common elements in those recommendations can be used to frame a research funding announcement. And, this will be done in partnership with CPRIT, and, we're hoping they can attend and be part of this. And so getting to the end, our childhood cancer recommendations are broad-based discovery research, core facilities with broader reach, and consideration of a clinical trials network. So as a final summary, I once again want to applaud CPRIT, Texas, and all of the Texans for forward-thinking development of CPRIT. It has visionary leaders. It has had and continues to have, and they have always and continue to embrace childhood cancer research. They've supported remarkable innovation and scientific breakthroughs benefiting children with cancer in Texas. And we think with continued support, that'll continue to be the case. And we hope supporting a Texas-wide clinical trials network will continue to sort of make gains. And we hope to provide more suggestions on this topic after the researchers round up in 2022. I do want to end thanking you once again for the opportunity to present on behalf of the CPRIT Advisory Committee on Childhood Cancers. I do credit every good idea to them, and if there's anything that's less favorable, I'll credit that to me. And obviously, thank you for your attention and support, particularly the leaders of CPRIT. They've really been wonderful for our advisory committee and childhood cancer, but thank you all who support this, and I welcome questions if that's appropriate.
If there are any questions for Dr. Gorlick, Dr. Hernandez, followed by Bill, followed by Dr. Rosenfeld.
Great. Thank you. Great presentation. A lot of information here. In your recommendations, childhood cancer recommendations, you stated core facilities and broader reach. Can you expand on that? What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the core facilities that have been supported in pediatrics have been based at major centers, but really provide a resource that's actually shared by investigators throughout the state. So as a simple example, Peter Howden in San Antonio leads a core that's been all about preclinical testing and developing model systems for testing new drugs in cancer. He has been able to create the models from tumor specimens obtained at multiple centers, including MD Anderson, including Southwestern. When he actually creates the models, he then shares the models back out. So all of us have models that he developed. I have models that originated from patients who were treated in Dallas. They have models that came from patients at MD Anderson. So the cores are really about the network of tying together cancer investigators and cancer oncologists, throughout the major centers. Again, I would still stick with my statement that, the larger centers have been bigger parts of these. A lot of our hope is to engage some of the more smaller centers. Some of them are involved in some of the cores, but their engagement is probably slightly less.
Okay. The other question I had is, I saw in your design that you have representation from across the state. But at a minimum, I would expect you to have every children's hospital represented on your list. And so I hope you look at putting everybody, not just those that work with you, but everybody from the state. There's I can't remember how many children's hospitals exist in Texas, but if there's 11, I would expect all 11 to be represented because they are representing the entire state. And then on your slide were incidence and 5-year survival by public health region. It's very enlightening to see El Paso and the border areas with the lowest survival region, which has been a major concern for a lot of Texans. And although you're right, you guys are making strides in Region 7 and above. You're absolutely right, and that's where the brain power, so to speak, is located. And from my perspective, what you guys really need to do is move out to Region 10, Region 1, Region 11, move out to where the patients are. Because I've seen patients firsthand where they have to travel when they're being put in clinical trials because they can't be treated in those areas, so they have to go to institutions such as yourselves, which is great. But that's really a tough decision for parents who have jobs and they have more than one child to take care of. And so I would urge you to, as part of your plan, not only to keep building your core facilities in Central Texas, but you guys really need to start moving out your resources, your doctors, your clinical apparatus, your research buildings. Start moving it out to the rest of the state of Texas, because then you're really going to have a bigger impact, and we can fix this unfortunate incidence, the survival rates that look pretty bad for Region 10 and 11.
Yeah, so thank you for all those comments. One, starting with just representation, the Frontiers Committee started by including, using everybody on the committee to identify the peds oncologists at every major program, meaning any childhood program, any pediatric cancer program. There is a Frontiers member, just specifically from Amarillo, from El Paso, from Lubbock. So we have folks from all of those sites. I totally agree with you. I think one of the challenges has really been sort of delivering the same access to trials, access to advanced technologies, looking at things like cell therapy. They're available in the eastern part of the state, but not to the same extent throughout the state. We've used clinical trials as an engine for driving things like, transmitting essential knowledge and skills to do exactly that. Part of the reason I emphasize showing the differences in survival is to highlight those differences. And I totally agree with you that more of the emphasis needs to be placed on supporting the whole state and every child with cancer in the entire state of Texas. The Frontiers Committee was doing exactly that. That is part of what we're trying to accomplish. We think a clinical trials RFA would be great. And to be honest, folks who know me, I am all about inclusion and transparency. I know CPRIT scientific leadership is coming to researchers Roundup, but let me make the invitation to anybody who would like to come to this. I am sure Annette Leslie will welcome your attendance, will welcome others. Anyone who would like to help shape the discussion, we would love to have you part of it.
Thank you, Richard. Dr. Rice? President Gerald, any questions?
Question. I'm not really that familiar with the pediatric oncology world anymore. Can you give us a view of CPRIT pediatric oncology from outside of Texas? What do people say, pediatric oncologists in New York and California and Massachusetts say about the CPRIT pediatric oncology program?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There is immense jealousy, just to be honest. So I think that's wonderful from a lot of standpoints. When I talk to my colleagues in Philadelphia, they wish their state had the same foresight and, interest in childhood cancer that Texas has demonstrated, and to cancer research overall through formation of CPRIT. The larger programs in the state of Texas are extremely well recognized at the national level, whether it be MD Anderson or Texas Children's, we are considered, or UT Southwestern or others. They are considered among the elite in pediatric oncology programs. There is certainly, again, there is an awareness that this is a big state. And, there is a regional concentration of these programs. So Texas Care overall, in the pediatric space is about average. It's not, the highest survival rates we see in this field, but I think that's because of the unevenness.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate your wonderful presentation, and your information raises a lot more questions from my good friend Bill.
Dr. Gorelick, thank you. This is Will Montgomery. Just a very quick question on your slide. Percent survival from 1960 to 2000. It looks like to me brainstem glioma survival has decreased between 1960 and 2000. Is that right, or am I just misreading the?
Yeah, if you look at the bar, it's subtly lower, but I would say it's not a big difference. I don't care if brainstem glioma's gotten worse. I think it hasn't gotten better, would be more the statement I would make. Brainstem glioma, unfortunately, because it can't be, because of its location and it's relatively, quote unquote, a benign tumor, it doesn't respond to chemotherapy. So the mainstay of treatment is really radiation, which has been for a long time. But the vast majority of patients have never survived brainstem glioma, unfortunately, and that has not changed.
Next, just another quick question on the overall incidence trends by public health region that Dr. Hernandez just mentioned. I note that those figures come from 2018. Do you have any reason to believe they have improved in the last 4 years?
I do not. So I use Michael Schur, who's an epidemiologist at Baylor and Texas Children's, to produce these. I think the reason he provided the 2018 data is because the more recent data, always moves a little bit until it solidifies. But I think the trends are actually, unfortunately, continuing. So incidence of childhood cancer in general is going up. That is a national phenomenon. But it's going up slightly faster in Texas than other places.
Very much.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, Richard, again, thank you very much, and I look forward to attending your meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care. Dr. LeBeau, please introduce Dr. Davis, who will provide the University Advisory Committee's annual report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Peter Davies, who's a professor and director of the Center for Translational Cancer Research of Texas A&M University Institute of Biosciences and Technology in Houston. He also serves as the head of the Department of Translational Medical Sciences at Texas A&M College of Medicine. Dr. Davies has had a long-standing interest and track record of accomplishments in cancer therapeutics and academic drug discovery. Following physician scientist training at the University of Miami, he completed 4 years of postdoctoral training at the National Cancer Institute before joining the faculty of the University of Texas Medical School in Houston. He spent more than 30 years at UT Houston, rising to the rank of Professor of Pharmacology and Medicine, Executive Vice President for Research, and Provost of the Health Science Center. In 2011, he moved to Texas A&M University to lead a program in cancer-related drug discovery research at the A&M Institute of Biosciences and Technology. Dr. Davies has often expressed support on behalf of himself and his colleagues for the support that he has received from CPRIT, and has been a very staunch advocate of supporting CPRIT in its goal of developing advances in the prevention and treatment of cancer that will benefit the citizens of Texas, the nation, and the world. And we've certainly benefited from his chairmanship of the University Advisory Committee. Davies?
Thank you very much, Dr. LeBeau. Let me see if I've mastered the technology enough. Have we got that slide up on your screens?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Well, it really is my pleasure to make this presentation to the Oversight Committee on behalf of the University Advisory Committee and to present to you a summary of the 2021 annual report and both the activities of the committee and some of the areas that we think are worthy of highlight. Just very briefly to summarize the membership of the University Advisory Committee, it's composed of 12 leaders of the academic and research enterprises in institutes of higher education across the state of Texas. When presenting the advisory committee, we very often emphasize the geographic reach of these institutions, as shown in the lower right in terms of doing that. And they are frankly distributed in many, but not all of the areas of the state in terms of representation. But I think it's also useful to understand the diversity of the committee in terms of institutional diversity. Of the 12 members on that committee, 6 of them are representatives of academic health centers, cancer centers, institutions, very often large institutions with robust cancer-related research programs of places like MD Anderson, UT Health Science Center San Antonio, UT Southwestern, Baylor College of Medicine. But in addition, the committee has representation from academic institutions, 6 of the academic universities across the state that are not specifically health-related HRIs in terms of doing that. Some of these are large tier 1 research universities, the University of Houston, Texas Tech University, but others, and Rice University, others are much smaller in terms of their overall research enterprise. Texas State University, and the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, an important member of that committee as well. So the committee really represents a diverse set of opinions in terms of CPRIT's academic research programs and their potential impact. To very briefly summarize the activities during the last year, 2021 was somewhat of an anomalous year for us, both because of obviously the disruptions due to COVID and also the transition in leadership of the academic research programs at CPRIT, with Dr. Wilson's stepping down from that position and Dr. LeBeau being recruited and joining the program in the fall. So that the actual committee meetings focused on 2 separate areas during 2021. The first was a special meeting called by Dr. Wilson to discuss specifically the issue of core facility support. We've heard a great deal already from Dr. Gorlick about the importance of the core facility program across our institutions. And the University Advisory Committee expressed strong support for the maintenance of the core facility program. The particular challenge that the core facility program faces is that over the last several years, the program has added new core facilities to them, which are now maturing to the point of coming up for renewal. So there is an issue of whether to invest resources in the renewal of existing core facilities versus new core facilities that may be addressing new opportunities and new needs. And this was an item of significant discussion. The recommendation of the UAC was, in fact, to preserve the mechanism of what's we called institutional gatekeeping, i.e. the academic institutions should make the selection between whether they feel their core facilities are worthy of continuation and renewal, or whether there are greater opportunities for new applications. But we did recommend that CPRIT consider setting aside pools of funding within the funding available for facilities for some degree of balance between renewal application and new awards. Also, and I'll address this a little later, were the regional concerns and the potential importance of core facilities within smaller academic campuses, as well as in the large medical centers. And then there were some specifics to do with refining the RFA to provide more explicit information on performance. The second meeting in the year in December was to review the FY21 Research and Scholar Awards and to meet Dr. LeBeau for the first time and to get from her her perspective and vision on the principles and priorities that she was considering as priorities for CPRIT's forward-looking programs. And I'll just very briefly summarize the information that Dr. LeBeau presented in terms of the principles for guiding the academic research program as she took over leadership of that program. The principles were a continuation and continuity of the excellent basic principles that have guided academic research at CPRIT, and the UAC certainly endorsed that, and the continued focus on the recruitment of outstanding researchers, innovative individual investigator awards, as we heard about today, and the investment in core facilities and other mechanisms for building infrastructure and research capacity. We particularly, I think, enjoyed hearing Dr. LeBeau's vision for expanding and focusing on expanding the geographic distribution of CPRIT, its impact on research and clinical care around the state, something Dr. Gorlick made just a moment ago in terms of doing that. An exploration of ways to increase the integration of CPRIT's academic research, product development, and prevention programs, and taking a look at the funding mechanisms to see whether there are opportunities to expand or refine the program. So these, and I'll return to this at the end, I think provide a very rich agenda for the advisory committee to consider and make recommendations in the coming year. Touching very briefly on the academic and research Scholar Awards for FY 2021. FY 21 was an anomalous year for us in terms of doing that, because as you may recall, during FY 20, as the COVID had its major impact on the economy in the state of Texas, CPRIT decided not to launch the FY 21.1 Rfas, that is the Individual Investigator Awards, to withhold that in deference to the economic concerns that were major issues within the state at that time. As a consequence, in FY 21, the cycle of RFAs that went out and applications with the 21.2 cycle, which largely reflect infrastructure type programs in terms of doing that. And that, in fact, has been the general outcome in terms of the research that was supported during FY 2021. The little pie chart down at the bottom here shows the investment in infrastructure that CPRIT made during that time. As in previous years, a major investment in terms of recruitment awards. About 50% of the expenditures were in the support of the recruitment of scientists to Texas in terms of doing that. There were 40 recruitment awards, 12 core facility awards, expanding the support for core facilities, both renewal awards and new program applications. 8 training grant awards, research training grant awards, and I'm going to speak more about those in a minute because I think they're an important part of CPRIT's investment in the human infrastructure for cancer research within the state. 2 of the new TREC, the Regional Excellence in Cancer Awards, one to El Paso, University of Texas, El Paso, and one to Texas Tech University. This is an exciting new program for expanding the impact of cancer-related research in areas of the state that have been somewhat underserved in the past, and we're certainly very eager to learn more about how those programs develop and mature in that program. And 2 programs, the Clinical Trials Network and the Early Clinical Investigator programs that also support by infrastructure, but the clinical trials infrastructure within the state. And then there were 28 high impact, high risk awards that were essentially the only individual investigator awards during that time of year in terms of doing that. So that it was a program that reflected the wisdom of restraint, in actual fact, during the financial crisis. But the University Advisory Committee is definitely looking forward to a restoration of proportionate funding, a balance of the resources that are committed to both individual investigator research awards as well as infrastructure awards and the other programs as well. And today's decision that I'm happily witnessed for the support for this next round of investigator research awards sort of puts the program back on track in terms of doing that. And I think that's really an important development. What I would like to do in the remaining few minutes of the presentation is to highlight two elements of the program that we haven't really, I think, talked about very much, but are important, I think, components. One of these has to do with the Research Training Awards and this program of building infrastructure within Texas of cancer research scientists. And the other is the program or the effort to support cancer-related research on academic campuses. We talk a lot about the health-related institutions, and obviously that's a major part of the program, but academic campuses also play an important role, I think, in terms of bringing some of the sophistication and support for cancer research to different regions of the state. The Research Training Awards FY21 was part of the cycle down in the lower left-hand corner here. Research Training Awards have been awarded every 4 to 5 years since 2010. So they're an intermittent funding mechanism to support training grants in there. Overall, CPRIT has invested about 8% of its infrastructure support in terms of the investment in Research Training Awards. These are 5-year grants, and one I think of the important features of the Training Grant Awards is the diverse aspects of cancer-related research that they've been able to support. Some of them are and many of them are in basic and translational cancer research, biosciences, but there are also important programs in epidemiology and prevention, computational biology and informatics, cancer therapeutics and drug discovery. So basically these programs are creating the next generation of scientists and investigators within our communities who are addressing various important aspects of cancer-related research. I put a list there of the awardees and the institutions. I forget the exact number there in terms of doing that, but basically there are these awards have been spread across the state. In FY 2021, the awards, 8 CPRIT approved funding for 8 of these research training grants. 6 of them were renewals, and some of these grants have been in operation since 2010 and reflect mature, highly productive basic training programs in translational cancer research, prevention research, UT Southwestern and Baylor College of Medicine, and development in and prevention research at UT Houston. 2 new awards were added to the portfolio last year. One of them is a biomedical informatics program out of UT Houston, and one is a cancer therapeutics training program, which is a multi-institutional training grant led by Texas A&M University. So that basically the important element, I think, of these things is that the training programs are building capacity in the long run by training both undergraduates, graduate students, and postdoctoral fellows in various aspects of cancer-related research. The other issue that I'd like to address is basically the issue of CPRIT's impact on cancer-related research within the academic campuses across the state. As I pointed out before, the membership of the UAC is divided between these 2 pools, institutional backgrounds in terms of doing that. And the pie chart on the right shows that, as one would expect, about 85% of CPRIT's expenditures in the area of research, health-related research and recruitment have been in the health-related institutions. The academic institutions have collected account for about 15% of that. And that reflects the reality of the scale and scope of cancer research at the HRIs. I think what the UAC wanted to emphasize and communicate was the importance of the resources that are also flowing into the academic campuses. That 15% represents $287 million of support for cancer-related research that's flowed into the academic campuses around the state. And on the little insert on the left here, 16 institutions have benefited from this support. Some of these have been very successful in securing these funds. The University of Texas at Austin and Rice University in particular have been major beneficiaries of this, but also many other institutions, particularly some of them located in less central regions of the state have also been active participants in the program. And one of the things that we found interesting when looking into this, if one looks on the right here, is that the much of this investment on the academic campuses is in the form of recruiting awards for scholars. The orange bars here represent the distribution between research and scholar awards in the health-related institutions. Understandably, it's about a 2-to-1 distribution between research support and scholar recruitment awards. But on the academic campuses, it's the scholar awards, I think, that are having a particular impact in terms of doing that. And this little figure just summarizes the 7 institutions, 7 academic campuses that have been successful in using CPRIT support to recruit scholars to their campuses to build their infrastructure of cancer-related research. And take surveying the members of the University Advisory Committee, the impact of these scholar awards is having a transformative effect, as I'll illustrate in a moment, on cancer-related research in these institutions. It's adding to the scientific diversity of the programs that are being supported. It's generating intellectual property, and it's certainly leading to an increase in federal funding for follow-on support for cancer-related research. I've surveyed some of the representatives on the committee to get their perspective from their institution's perspective of the impact of CPRIT support on their programs. And these are the comments from Dr. Yusuf Shamu of Rice University, who pointed out that Rice University has received almost $78 million in funding from research. And much of this money has been invested in the recruitment of 18 new faculty members, cancer researchers to the state. 6 established investigators are shown on the left here in terms of doing that. These are world-class established investigators, and 12 first-time investigators. This represents some of them. And what I think is very interesting is that if one looks at the academic strengths of these individuals who are being recruited, one sees a real diversity. One has distinguished physicists who are joining the programs, medicinal and synthetic chemists, world-class leaders in natural product chemistry, bioengineering, mechanical engineering, biosciences, bringing into these campuses programs that are building the critical mass in key cancer-related technologies, synthetic biology, next-gen therapeutics, nanoscience, machine learning, and the like. And so that, as Dr. Shamu says, these programs are really investing in the future of cancer research within the state and the infrastructure to support it. And equally important is the recruitment of talented young scientists from leading academic institutions around the country to join these research programs. This summarizes some of the first-time tenure track faculty members who've joined the faculty at Rice in the last few years, folks from MIT, from Caltech, Iowa, Princeton, Stanford University. So the program is really bringing into the state and into these campuses intellectual horsepower that I think will generate and continue to grow cancer research across a broad spectrum of programs. The University of Houston, Dr. Claudia Newhauser, wanted to emphasize a different aspect of the impact of the Scholar Awards. And this was the ability to bring in star leading researchers involved in cutting edge cancer research onto a large academic campus like the University of Houston. And she highlighted the recruitment of Dr. Frank McKeon from Singapore, who joined in 2015 as a scholar recipient and brought onto their campus a novel cloning technology for isolating stem cells, not only from tumors, but also from pre-malignant dysplastic cells, and creating experimental models for being able to explore therapeutic vulnerabilities in different aspects of cancer progression, primarily in this case, in the GI tract. And Dr. Newhauser wanted to emphasize that not only did this bring cutting edge technology onto their campus, that led to a real surge in terms of patents, patent applications, commercialization of a new entity that spun out of Dr. McKeon's research in the group, as well as almost $9 million in extramural research grant funding. So that sometimes bringing in a real scientific star can enhance and grow training. Dr. McKeon also wanted to point out that the support of CPRIT has allowed the research program to be very actively engaged in training undergraduates, and not just graduate students, but providing opportunities for high school students and undergraduates to get engaged in cancer research early in their careers and then follow on to graduate training. And actually the same comment was made by the folks at Texas State University, who highlighted the fact that CPRIT-funded research programs are helping to advance their programs. Baylor University, the Department of Chemistry there has been particularly active in terms of support from CPRIT in recruitment, recruiting Dr. John Wood, a CPRIT scholar in 2012 as professor and chair, and Dr. Wood then has followed on with recruitment of young investigators. Dr. Lila Romero just joined the program last year in terms of doing that. And that leverages both the talent and the ongoing research in chemistry being carried out on that campus that is helping to grow the research enterprise. So I think one of the key messages here is that for the academic campuses, a CPRIT's program of supporting recruitment of leading scientists to those campuses is having an impact in terms of building capacity for cancer research in many of the campuses around the state. But there's also an interesting phenomenon in terms of those campuses that have not been competitive in terms of receiving scholar awards, but have been successful in recruiting core facility rewards to support the development of core facility programs. Here are the list of campuses that are basically, I think it's 8 campuses that have participated in CPRIT funding research programs, but haven't been actually recruiting individuals. Interestingly, of these 8, 6 are minority serving institutions, and 4 of these institutions, UT San Antonio, UT El Paso, Texas Southern University, and UT Rio Grande Valley most recently, have been recipients of large infrastructure grants, both the core facility grants, CFSAs, that we've been discussing, and we're very excited UTAP has very recently landed one of the 2 TREC recipients to build the infrastructure for supporting cancer research in terms of doing that. And what I'd like to do is just to highlight for a minute how it's working, how this business of putting core facilities into some of these smaller campuses, and not necessarily research-intensive campuses, can have large impact in terms of the development of capacity to support research. And this is really using as example the award of a core facility grant to Texas Southern University in 2015. Texas Southern University is a historically Black campus in terms of doing that, and their College of Pharmacy, led by Dr. Dong Liang, was successful in developing and securing a core facility to support cancer-related drug development primarily through the formation of this core. I think the key elements of this that are so important and are highlighted here, that putting this facility and capacity onto that campus opened up opportunities for collaborative projects with major institutions across the state. The original program was a partnership with the Gulf Coast Consortium and the University of Houston, led by TSU. That has blossomed into a whole range of collaborative research ventures that are expanding, and participation in the new cancer therapeutics training program as well. So the core facility is serving as an engine for expanding greatly the involvement of faculty and programs within their university. In addition, it has real benefit in terms of the securing of additional support. The presence of the CPRIT-funded core facility and the activity of that program, as the folks at TSU say, was a major contributor to their receiving designation with a $8 million Center for Biomedical Minority Health Research Program award last year. And it's starting to stimulate competitive extramural funding among junior faculty members, people successful getting grants from the NSF, NIH, and $1 million grant for CPRIT in the prevention space by folks involved in basically shared interests in cancer-related research, so that the programs stimulate large activities in those things. They also wanted me to point out that the program has collateral benefits in terms of doing that, and that's the educational benefit of providing an opportunity for state-of-the-art training for their graduates and trainees. And they point out two of their trainees, Dr. Awasomo, received her PhD in 23, and Dr. Marie Tukam in 2019, who's working as a staff scientist in Satara. And they actually included in their report to me this short message from Dr. Tukam on the impact of the program on her life and how it developed. In the interest of time, I won't walk you through it, but it's actually worth reading, because in some ways it really highlights the importance and impact of these programs in providing opportunities to people who might not otherwise have easy access to them, to develop careers and to become engaged in state-of-the-art cancer research. The programs are not, there are challenges, and these are some of the challenges that have already were referred to in the discussion here. The award of a CFSA last year to UT Rio Grande Valley was a sentinel event in terms of providing support for infrastructure within the campus down there. But I had a long conversation with Dr. Chauhan, who's chairman of the PI on that program and the leadership, about the challenges that we all need to recognize in terms of building infrastructure in regions of the state that do not have, as was pointed out in the discussion, some of the built-in capacity and arrangements in the major medical centers to do that. And the challenge of how to leverage CPRIT's huge investment in cancer research into programs that not only support search for groundbreaking advances in cancer prevention and cures, but also engage the talents of the next generation of young scientists from the state's many diverse communities in the shared fight against cancer. And I think Dr. LeBeau has emphasized that this really is an area of very active engagement by the University Advisory Committee in helping to explore ways to engage a broader set of communities in the cancer-related programs. Just to close, where do we go from here? Dr. LeBeau, in her presentation to us, set out to the UAC the agenda that she would like to see focused on in the coming year, and one that the committee enthusiastically endorsed. They're focusing on multi-investigator research and center awards, expanding population and behavioral research and engagement in campuses with interest and expertise in those areas. The Pediatric Clinical Trials Network we've heard about, dealing and addressing with this, I think, critical issue of geographic diversity, expanding the availability of core facilities and support into various regions of the state, and working on the career development in the next generation of young scientists who really are the future of cancer research within the state. So I think that's really what I wanted to present to you. I would just like to convey to you the appreciation and the pleasure that shared by the members of the advisory committee in the opportunity to work with the leadership of CPRIT in developing what is a truly outstanding program of cancer research in the state of Texas. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. Are there any questions from the Oversight Committee? Dr. Hernandez.
Morning. That was a wonderful presentation. It goes to show that our biggest asset is human capital, and we should be investing in human capital. As CPRIT, at least a board member, my opinion is that this is a very good presentation, a great start, and we're moving the needle. And it goes to show that when we invest in the right areas, it really makes an impact on human life, but also on the economy around the state. And I'm delighted to see that it's been recognized, the fact that, we take a lot of risk when we invest our taxpayer money, whether it's in a basic science lab or recruiting people from outside the state of Texas, which I'm very fond of. I'm glad we're doing that. But we also take risks when we invest in our junior campuses, upcoming campuses. It is a risk, but it's a worthwhile risk, as you can see, even from Texas Southern University. It is absolutely a worthwhile risk. So when we have discussions, at least I do in public, and the taxpayer approaches me, why did you approve a study on stress on a fly? And I said, you got to look at the whole picture. it actually does contribute to it, but I understand where you're coming from. We could be also contributing brick and mortar and more scientists to the, Permian Basin area, El Paso area. You can, absolutely. And it is high risk, but it's the chicken and the egg. Those campuses will usually tell us, well, I don't have a building, so I can't attract the Harvard guys, and the one Harvard guy I have can't do research because he doesn't have enough infrastructure money for whatever machine they're looking for. So it's tied together. So I urge my fellow board members, remember, we are impacting the entire state, and this is a wonderful presentation they did, and to clearly delineate, we can invest, as people call it, high risk, in institutions to bring them up. That is our responsibility, our social responsibility, but also for our patients.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez. Thank you, Dr. Davis. My echo and the Oversight Committee echoes Dr. Hernandez's well said thoughts and opinions. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Moving on, then we'll have Ms. Majid present and introduce Dr. Shoker, who will provide the Prevention Advisory Committee's annual report. Thank you.
My pleasure to introduce Dr. Kiran Shokar as the chair of the Prevention Advisory Committee to give the annual report of the committee. Dr. Shokar is a professor and chair of the Department of Population Health and Associate Dean for Community Affairs at Dell Medical School at the University of Texas at Austin. He was previously at UTMB in Galveston and Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center, El Paso. Dr. Shokar's research focuses on multi-level clinic and community-based interventions that bridge the divide between public health, the community, and the healthcare system in order to address cancer health disparities among racial and ethnic minorities and vulnerable populations. In addition to her busy academic life, Dr. Shokar has been the recipient of multiple CPRIT awards, and CPRIT is privileged to have Dr. Shokar serve as the chair of the Prevention Advisory Committee. Welcome, Kiran.
Thanks, Ramona. Thank you to the committee for inviting me to present on behalf of the Prevention Advisory Committee. So I'm just going to share my presentation with you. Okay, do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm here on behalf of the members of the advisory committee. We're one of the newest advisory committees. We actually came into being just as coronavirus was hitting our planet. So all our meetings have been virtual so far. We look forward to continuing them in the future in person. And so we're evolving and learning how we can best help CPRIT to have the maximum impact that they can in the prevention space. So what I'm going to do today is just briefly review with you the some prevention grantee data. We have to discuss the impact of COVID. This has had a direct and considerable effect on the activities of our grantees in the prevention space. And then I'm going to relay to you some of the conversations we've had about recommendations and thinking about the future for developing further our prevention efforts. So here is our members roster. So there are 10 members. Recently, we just included Dr. Hall, who you approved today for assignment to this committee. The 7 of the participants represent academic organizations and are really kind of one of the earliest participants in prevention program development through CPRIT in the state and have a lot of expertise and experience. And then we also have some people representing other stakeholders that are very important in the prevention world. So we have representative of the community health centers across the state, that's Roxana Cruz. And then we have a representative from the American Cancer Society. And then we felt that Dr. Hall would be a really important addition, especially in communication and regarding prevention in some of the other spaces that happen across the state. So these are our members. Originally, when I was appointed to this committee, I was representing West Texas. All my work was in El Paso. So we had very good regional representation. So I think one of the things we're going to think about going forwards is how we add some representation from the West and North of Texas as well. I think that's important. Okay, so these are current grantees. This is as of FY21. So you can see that the projects run across the gamut of preventable cancers, screening detectable cancers primarily. So colorectal, HPV-related, tobacco-related cancers, as well as breast, cervical, liver, and lung. And some projects cover multiple cancers, so that's why the numbers don't always add up to be exactly the same. And here you can see by kind of intervention type. So tobacco cessation focused activities are fairly prominent. Vaccination, primarily HPV, but also some Hep B as well in there. And then the majority of the projects really focus on direct provision of preventive activities in the screening space. So just looking at the grants by organization type, you can see that the majority of the grants are given to academic organizations and with a minority to non-academic. That's not to say that there are not beneficiaries of funding and support from CPRIT that are through the academic grantees that are community organizations. So a lot of these projects, you cannot do them without significant community engagement and stakeholder engagement in order to really deliver these services. So although the academic institution may be the primary recipient of the grants do fund through to those kinds of organizations. And here you can see, as of FY21, that there's a balance between new projects and expansion projects. So some of the expansion projects have really been going for 10 years, and there's a lot of learning and experience in that they've managed to expand beyond the original target area, and that's really important. But we're continuing to support new projects, some of which are in new areas or reaching new populations. And then you can see that the tobacco, lung, and cancer screening program, has about almost a fifth of the projects. And then dissemination, which is a very important mechanism that I think will be strengthened by the changes in terms of timing and support, is a minority of the work. And I'll come back to implementation and dissemination because that's really, really important for our work in prevention. So here I'm just showing you a kind of trend over time of prevention grantees. So you'll see on the next slide, the actual numbers are included, but you can see that if you look closely at this slide, there have been some changes in the pattern of grant targets for the different kinds of cancers. So breast and cervical cancer grantee numbers really declined in FY 2018, and we saw an uptick in HPV-related and tobacco-related work. Overall, though, there is a decline in the number of grants overall in the prevention program, and you can see it on this slide here. We're bubbled around 105. It went up in FY 2020 and then has dropped off recently. So hopefully we'll be able to address that because we really have a lot of work ahead of us in the prevention space. I'll discuss that later. So here you can see actual numbers of cancer screenings. You can see there's been a decline in colorectal cancer screenings in FY21 from a peak of 75,000 in FY 2019, and then also a fall in breast cancer screening and in cervical cancer screening. So these are the cancers that have the most projects devoted to them, as you can see. So that this is concerning, and we need to really, this doesn't even reflect, FY22 and the continued impact of COVID. So some of this is COVID, but some of this, there may be other things going on. And again, I think that's something we really have to face and that we've been thinking about as a committee. So, as I mentioned, coronavirus has had a massive impact on health in the world, and definitely in Texas as well. You know, that there's been a lot of reports, international, European, about what kind of impacts happened on cancer diagnosis, screening, the stage of disease. And we've really, the reports, you know, the national data won't be available for a year or two in the US, but there are multiple reports of different health systems, different geographies, internationally and locally. And, you know, there are really kind of dire predictions about what's going to happen to incidence in the coming years, and also mortality. So we've done, you know, really well with our trajectory in incidence and mortality overall in cancer. It has declined continuously in the US, but we're really kind of bracing ourselves for what's going to happen as a result of the impact of the coronavirus. And we're really going to need to be ready to address the changes that have happened. So different studies, different reports have shown that there is a shift from early stage diagnosis, particularly in breast cancer, to later stage diagnosis, and also increasing numbers of cases of where a metastasis is already prevalent when a person is referred for treatment to an oncologist. And, you know, little reports from all over. So we're waiting to see what the overall impact is going to be, but certainly there's been modeling work that has shown that there will be an impact on mortality. You know, it could be as high as 10%. So just, I think it's important to kind of dig into the reasons. I think we all know intuitively that, you know, this has impacted the whole way that we live our lives. So patients have avoided non-urgent care, and they have made decisions about their lives that mean that they've switched jobs or aren't working or are working for themselves. So that has led to changes in access to health insurance. So that has an impact on diagnosis and also on screening as well. And then organizations, particularly healthcare organizations, obviously they've been at the brunt of the work and that has been done in dealing with this new disease. And they've had to shift priorities and workflows to take care of people in acute need because of coronavirus, as opposed to their ongoing work with prevention and chronic disease management. There's been a lot of turnover, retraining, personnel shortages. So this has had an impact on not only screening, but diagnosis and treatment as well. And then for our grantees in particular, a lot of the work in the communities, rural and otherwise, is done in the community. So this obviously has had a big impact on the way that they do their work, and also, you know, the amount of engagement that they're really able to have with community who's afraid of being around people and so on. This slide is really key because I think that there's really a very urgent need. We need to fast track prevention and control, delivery of services, but also the research around that, because some of the things we knew about how to do prevention have really been shaken up by what's happened through the pandemic. We need to catch up on all the screenings and diagnosis that has been missed. And so we're really going to have to be ready for when people start feeling more comfortable and have the bandwidth really to think about their health and prevention in their health. So the committee have really we've been meeting and kind of discussing what makes sense in the prevention space and how can we really prepare ourselves for the next few years, which are going to be very rough in terms of cancer outcomes. So so I'm going to present about 3 or 4 ideas. There's a lot of themes in common, and we're continuing to meet and work to kind of really flesh these out. So one of the things that we really need to do is accelerate collaboration. You know, regionally, we've heard a lot about cancer outcomes for childhood cancers and so on, and capacity across the state and how it varies regionally. So you know, if we're really going to kind of catch up and also advance prevention, we really need to think more broadly about how we deliver those services to patients and community members. Because if you look at this slide in the rationale, you know, the uninsured rate has gone up over the last 2 years. There's about, estimates are 5.3 million uninsured in Texas. About 1.6 million of those are seen in these community health centers that are really focused on taking care of the underserved and uninsured. And then there are other kinds of clinics, academic clinics, and also county level clinics that see a significant number of uninsured. However, there remain a lot of people that are totally unengaged with the healthcare system, either because of capacity, where they live and the geography, or because they simply can't afford it. So we need, you know, to really ramp up the way that we're thinking about reaching all these people if we're going to kind of hope that this little, that what we're going to see is a blip and not a continued increase in incidence of mortality. So we need to be, given these new things and our new reality, we need to be sure that we're really promoting the use of novel strategies, learning collaboratives, really thinking about implementation science. You know, this is very important. We have done a lot of work over the last 20 years or so, and particularly in the last 10 with CPRIT support in understanding how to reach people and encourage them to make the decisions to prevent cancer that lead to the prevention of cancer. So we've learned a lot, but we still need to know more about how to adopt those interventions that we know work into clinical settings and places where that are trying to deliver prevention services. How do we help them to change and incorporate that? And then the intervention itself, how do we adapt it to the population? So that is really what implementation science is about. And it's all about bringing the knowledge that we have gained to the people. Because just creating the knowledge isn't enough. If we want to really, you know, bend the curve or prevent cancer, then those strategies that we've learned about need to be implemented. So that's why this implementation science is very, very important in this prevention space. So there are other ideas about virtual strategies, using Project Echo for capacity building and so on. So I think there's an opportunity, we believe, for revisiting existing RFAs that are prevention RFAs to really bolster the support that's going through those grants to the community organizations and clinics that are serving the uninsured and low-income populations. We already know that most of the funding goes to an academic university level grantee, and we know that some of that goes into the community and community organizations, but I think that we really need to encourage that funds flow. And the reason that's important is, A, that's where a lot of our population seeks care, but it's also because in order to really make sustainable changes in those providers of care, they need investment to support infrastructure development. So a second piece related to this is, and we as a committee have been thinking about how to do this, and we have some ideas. We really need to engage with the health centers and community organizations to better understand barriers and opportunities through focus group work and surveys, especially as they're all emerging from the impact of the coronavirus, because I think there's going to be new barriers that we never anticipated or even identified in the past. So another way to really make a dramatic impact is to use a cancer as a nidus for really developing infrastructure for prevention work that's statewide and responsive to regional needs and regional capacity. So we, the committee feels that colorectal cancer is a really good example that could be used to pilot this approach. And the reason is that there are very mature programs in screening. It's scalable because there is an at-home component that you can do for screening. The leaders of established programs are very engaged and they've had sustained effective programs. So the idea really here is to create a statewide network that's a collaboration between academic organizations and community partners and other stakeholders that are kind of relevant for this prevention delivery, and to really model it on other cooperatives and networks that have shown sustainability over time and have really had a big impact. So that, you know, to really move the needle. These programs, you know, if I showed you a map, it would look very similar to the map that was shown by Dr. Davis. We do not have good regional distribution because we don't have the capacity. So we really need to be smarter and in building that capacity across the state, and thinking differently about how we can really move the needle on an effort like this. And, you know, the other thing we need to think about is beyond CPRIT. You know, we want to create things that are sustainable and persist if CPRIT goes in 10 years. And the regionalization model can be based on other Texas-wide initiatives in the psychiatry space. They've really done great work in this network development and a regionalization model, and we can kind of learn from that. So the next recommendation is the research capacity. Again, we heard a lot from the previous speakers about the impact of training programs and investing in the human side of infrastructure. So we really feel that this is a great opportunity to really build that. There's been some great work, and you know, there's been at least one facility, core facility kind of training program that has focused on prevention and control. But we think there's really an opportunity to widen that, maybe through a different kind of an RFA. We need to increase the pool of experts in research areas that are relevant for actually making changes in the population and in the community to bring prevention to the people. So community-based research methods, intervention development in the community, implementation science, so that those things that we already know work can be adopted into different settings, and they can be adapted so they actually meet the need of that particular population, if it's rural or border, or you know, some other way that they have unique needs. And the health services research, because we really need to understand what's working and what isn't working. So, you know, there's opportunities to develop American Cancer Society's Cancer Control Career Development Award, because I think the pool of scientists that would be interested in this kind of work and tend to go into this kind of work are really the clinical investigators, primary care investigators, because these are the ones that are really thinking about the healthcare system and you know, the science behind how you really change behavior. And I think there's an opportunity to really collaborate with the academic research program side, both in the focused the network development recommendation that I just mentioned, but also in this training recommendation. And then, you know, there's lots of creative things that can happen, like such as investing clinical investigators in health centers to really understand the environment and to create that relationship and bridge between academia and clinics serving low-income patients. And then the last set of recommendations, kind of rushing through because I know we're over time, is that, you know, we really need to be creative in the way, you know, the programs contract with the organizations. Often the prevention programs, they have to create a care pathway for the uninsured and underserved. That doesn't exist, and it requires a lot of contracting with partnering entities in the care pathway. And this can take a long, long time, and sometimes it never happens. And even though the commitment is there, for some reason, the process breaks down, or there's competing priorities from this small organization or health delivering organization where, you know, we never get to the, you know, executing the contract. So we've talked with CPRIT about ways we can support our grantees in getting through that place. The other place, I think that just in general, in terms of prevention and control and the kind of disciplines and the kinds of work research work that happens and the methods that go along with that, we need to make sure that our review panels really reflect expertise in those kinds of methods, so that people that submit those kinds of grants are really getting a good match and a good understanding of what they're trying to do and good evaluation. And then another point, which is very important, as you all know, prevention is limited to 10% of the funding of the academic research side. So we really need to be creative in seeking collaboration with the academic program side. So because there is a lot of overlap, particularly in implementation science, for how we can create these hybrid kinds of programs where prevention services are being provided, but there's a research or evaluation component that's very important in providing the services, but also understanding the best way to deliver the services so that we maximize efficiency. So I think that Dr. LeBeau was kind enough to come to our meeting in December, and we had a really great conversation with her, and she gained some insight into the kinds of things that we were talking about. And I feel that we have a really good partner in thinking through this. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions if we have time.
Thank you, Dr. Shoker, for that very succinct report, including recommendations, in particular the impact of COVID on as I'll quote you, the continuum of care in the management of cancer across the board. Are there any questions? None. Dr. Shoker, I really would like to take this opportunity to thank you and your committee's hard work, and recommendations will be taken to heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on, members, we will take up agenda item 14 at the end of the agenda. Turning to item 15, the chair recognizes Ms. McConnell to present the Chief Operating Officer's report.
Good morning. You have my report behind tab 12, so I won't go into any detail other than to highlight that we have received a second quarterly royalty payment from Merck for the Welireg sales of a little over $17,500. With respect to our debt issuance history, in November of 2021, TPFA completed a general obligation bond transaction of $582.3 million, which included a refunding of $347.3 million in outstanding CPRIT commercial paper, as well as a refinancing of $144.8 million in new money proceeds, as well as a refinancing of approximately $90.2 million in existing CPRIT bonds, and that was to get some savings from the debt service on those bonds. Right now, we don't anticipate requesting TPFA to issue another tranche for this year until the fourth quarter. And that will be our final tranche for FY 2022. With respect to the 2022 conference, unfortunately, the solicitation for a conference venue closed on February 2nd without receiving any bids. So we've reached out, our procurement manager has reached out to the venues in the Austin area and gotten some feedback. It had to do with dates, and so we are going to extend those dates through the end of December of 2023 and reissue the RFP and see what we can come up with then. Are there any questions?
Rosenfeld.
I think based upon the information that we received with the reissuance of the bonds, which is on it's on 12/11, and the fixed rate interest rate that our bonds were issued back in November was 2.19%. So, I mean, even before that, it was maybe as high as 2.6, 3.4. So they seem to be holding relatively low at this point. I would hesitate, and I know TPFA doesn't project those bond rates too far into the future, but they do watch those markets very closely on our behalf.
One other quick question. I'm really sorry to hear about the biannual meeting. I look forward to those meetings. You mentioned that you looked at Austin. Then previous Oversight Committee, we talked about potentially other venues. And Dr. Hernandez mentioned West Texas. Looked at other cities besides Austin?
We had not, because we issued it specifically for Austin. One of our issues is that we use the actual agency staff to help support a lot of the conference activities, and trying to go outside of the Austin area presents some issues just with having that added support, especially during the conference, because they do provide a lot of manpower when we're at the conference, and we would have to then consider costs of hiring temporary staff as well. And in the past, we have looked at other venues outside of Austin. We did have an open RFP for the 2017 conference, and we did not receive any bids from outside of Austin.
Dr. Rice?
I was just wanting to extend that kind of line of questions, and in the interest of the conversations we've had about rural or other kinds of non-mainstay locations as it relates to cancer research and funding in all institutions, I wondered if we've looked into the idea of perhaps hosting notwithstanding those problems, but we can get hotel rooms and hosting the annual or the biannual or whatever meeting in Far Texas. They have availability. And I say that in not really in jest, but the idea would be take it someplace that would be, right on the front of a less urban arena.
I understand that, and this opinion has been expressed to us ever since I've been here. But we have polled the likely attendees, of which 85% of them at least are our grantees. That's who the conference is for. They have expressed a strong preference to have it be in the Austin area, and I think if we had it we've discussed Waco, in particular the Waco Temple area, it would severely impact the attendance. This is a real disappointment. Another major factor in this is hesitancy on the hotels to commit room rates at our required state government or the GSA rate, and being able to document everybody who attends it. For instance, it's easy for somebody from MD Anderson or UT Rio Grande Valley to show their ID that they are a state employee, but Rice University, Baylor College of Medicine are not state employees and therefore are not eligible for that rate.
But just to extend it, sorry, that I was thinking one of those other kinds of cities, like a Far Texas, might not have the rate structure such that it would be achievable.
I mean, we can attempt.
You want to help me out here? It's.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let her help me out. I expressed a strong interest in having it, say, in Houston or Dallas. But the traction wasn't there. I mean, the hotel, the venues weren't interested in it. And we really thought, with the proliferation of the hotels in Austin, that we were going to get proposals. There's even a facility in Round Rock that I thought was extremely attractive, the Kalahari Resort. I'm going to do it.
Well, I was just going to, I said it a third time, that, you know, the rate structure in a major city will be wholly different maybe than the rate structure.
But they still have to respond to the RFA.
The RFA has to be open to the state, not just obviously the city of Austin. Second of all, you know, when you mentioned that the attendees, the people that we give money to, right? That's what you're talking about. That we give, they're the ones telling us that they won't come to our party. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Or it would, they wouldn't phrase it that way, but it's going to impact the number of people that attend. This is a large conference.
Yes, sir, it is. We're a large state. San Antonio, Houston, Waco, Dallas, El Paso. I mean, it's a beautiful state.
There is nobody more disappointed not having this than me.
When do we project it will occur, to the conference?
Well, we're hoping now sometime in maybe 2023.
I mean, here's another factor that we discussed at recent senior staff meetings is for the time period that we were hoping to have it this year, it's now too late in order to get the commitments. You know, I would love to just Xerox the agenda from the meeting we had planned 2 years ago, but it's not that simple. The keynote speakers like Jim Allison, who really wants to help us and to present, and he's booked, or I presume he's booked. But I mean, you got to give these people a long lead time, I said that government rate plus in this situation. The delays in getting approval to release the documents for this. We can't as a state agency just release a request like this. It has to go through approval, and that approval takes a month to 6 weeks at best.
Doctor, sorry for coming. Did you have
I was just going to say, I wanted to bring up the point, Wayne, and you may expand on this, that the annual meeting is a big deal, but it's not as if CPRIT and staff and our leaders haven't gone out on a roadshow to other areas of the state multiple times. So, you know, information is getting out there. They're going to the Rio Grande Valley. They're going to West Texas. And that may even be a better way to engage people, you know, on a one-on-one or a more personal basis, especially in the areas that we are wanting to get more activity and proposals from.
Yeah, that's kind of a different issue. Yes, COVID aside, we do get around the state. We have discussed, particularly, you'll recall, when we were doing the CPRIT 2.0 planning, that we were going to hold regional meetings to meet with various stakeholders. And that's one thing. The conference is an incredible networking opportunity for them. Remember, they're going to have an enormous poster session that is highly popular, and it's really the networking that these people bring. I want to mention, Dr. Gorlick commented about the Researchers Roundup in a couple of months for the childhood and adolescent cancer researchers. I think we may use that as a successful model for other specialties in cancer. Those folks, that really took off. My hat's off to Annette Leslie and the Carson Leslie Foundation, and I encourage y'all. I think you're planning to come, Dr. Patel, but there's another opportunity for them to network. So we'll drop down to that, but there's no substitute for that big conference.
Thank you. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the interest of time, at the end of the day, needless to say, the Oversight Committee is very interested in having these conferences and the networking you talked about. Perhaps we can bring it back in the next meeting as regards what progress we've made, because we won't be able to solve that today. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Loeffler, welcome to CPRIT. I've had a wonderful time reading all your communiques. Will you update us on the CPRIT communication activities, please? Thank you.
Chairman, members, I'll be very brief. I know that I'm one of the few things that stands between you and lunch and freedom, so
and compliance
very quickly,
training.
You have my memo in the packet. There's two things I wanted to highlight. As you mentioned, we have ramped up the capabilities for communications, including media monitoring, and hopefully everyone should be getting the daily news updates. So I'd love to get some feedback if you like that, if there's something you'd like to see. I've gotten a few notes, so I'd like to improve that. And also, we're also adding capabilities for getting out press releases and direct media relations media. So we brought on Meltwater, which is a new cloud platform that's working well. So we're expanding on that. And then the last thing I want to address is social media. Numbers are pretty low. I'd like to really see them come up over the next period. So we've engaged Han, our friends at Han, to help with some social media messaging, add a little more interactivity to that social media.
Thank you. Questions? Dr. Hernandez?
Oh, no, I just had a comment. I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, it'll get better, but, you know, what will really make it better if you move the conference around and you mark it all over the state of Texas. That'll really get you going.
Wait on that.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Loeffler. I appreciate you. Moving on to item 10, doubling back to take up the internal auditor's report on the agenda item 10. The chair recognizes Mr. Graves to present his report. At the conclusion of his report and after any questions from the Oversight Committee, we will move into closed session to receive the internal auditor's update on the internal audit report over the Information Technology General Controls, Mr. Graves. Made it rather short.
Thank you. Yes, just briefly, status report as of January 30th, 2022. We are in our phase of IT computer controls remediation assistance. We've been working on this for some time. We briefed you at our last meeting about the plan for that, and so we're in progress there. As for the remainder of the schedule, we have vendor contract compliance scheduled to commence in March. We have started internal planning with that, and we'll work with management to perform some month. Records management maintenance, our audit advisory engagement is planned for April, May, in that time frame, and then procurement in the May, June. Just be aware we may have to flip-flop those as part of timing, depending on where we're at with IT staff and full as we go across the rest of this year, as well as in our 2022 internal audit follow-ups on -2. All of those follow-ups have an IT component, and so we will plan to perform those at the same time we perform the work on the records management. That is summary and status. We're currently in progress in a project with the rest of these plans. I have provided you our summary schedule on page 7-3. One note for you on that. We did add to this. Previously, we'd left off the disaster recovery advisory work from the schedule because it's an advisory engagement at the request of the audit. So you'll see that line item added within the schedule. So if you compare the two, you'll see a jump in some of the numbers, but that's because of that advisory. They wanted to be able to track that That's all my planned remarks for today.
Are there any questions from the Oversight Committee? Hearing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The Oversight Committee will move into closed session to receive an update on the internal audit report over information regarding technology general controls. Given the sensitive nature of the discussion about information security and potential vulnerabilities, the Texas Open Meetings Act authorizes the state governing bodies to meet in a closed session to discuss security audits. To minimize the number of times we move into closed session, I also want to call up items 14, 16, and 20 for closed session discussion. Once we return from closed session, we will take up items 21 and 22. For the record, we will move into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.076 to discuss the internal audit information technology general controls, and the Oversight Committee will also take up agenda items 14, 16, and 20 while in closed session to seek advice from counsel pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act 551.071. People joining the Oversight Committee are Mr. Roberts, Ms. Doyle, Ms. McConnell, Burgess, Ms. Eckel, Shannon Cusick, Dan Graves, and Mr. Robert Neal. The time is 12:16. With everyone here, the board now reconvenes in open session. The time is 13:05 hours. Using that clock. We will not take up agenda item 18 or 19. Moving to agenda item 21, we will meet the next regular Oversight Committee meeting on May 18th, 2022. There are no further business and there is no objection.
Well, yes, I'm going to object to something.
The chair moves to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 13:06.